Amen. Oh my goodness, yes. So what do you think causes us to have a disconnect for human relationships? And then how would you say that that disconnect shows up when we're in a toxic relationship with someone?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. There are so many facets. Really, um, I think what tends to disconnect us from having quality human relationship, in my limited experience, um, is whenever we get absorbed with what we want and we start
Mhm.
manipulating. And that is when we're not loving others as we want them to love us.
Exactly.
And it comes even down to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but then love others as you love yourself.
Yes.
And the disconnect, what I have seen, usually starts with us not properly connecting with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with our spirit, our soul, and meeting those needs there. And that often even translates into not meeting our physical needs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just taking care of that relationship with ourselves. How can we take care of the relationships around us or keep those healthy if we're not doing it with ourselves first?
Mm-hmm.
And that usually gets translated into, the self-love. And
Right.
you've got that huge self-love movement.
Right.
And there are, both sides on that one. But it does come down to, how can you love others as you love yourself if you don't love yourself?
Period.
And then, yes. And then what is love? Love is of God, you know, and how does God love you? So it comes down to remembering who made you, who you are, exploring who you are,
Right.
and learning how to love yourself where you are, just as you are.
Truth.
And then constantly taking that next step in the race, just like Paul. Paul talked about this all the time,
You sure did.
and constantly working on himself and on his relationship with himself
Mm-hmm.
and with his struggles and his temptations. He was always working on it and taking that next step in the race.
Yes.
So I think that's where the disconnect starts for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. The second part of the question
Sure. How do you
was
think that that disconnect also, for human connection, also plays a role when it's a toxic relationship that you might be in? And when I say a toxic relationship, this could be romantic. This could be another sister brother in Christ from the church. This could be in ministry, business relationship, a friendship. So all of the above, basically. This could be even a co-worker.
okay. Um, so like fostering that, how that disconnect can foster toxic relationships, or why we stay in them.
While we stay, well, it's like, why do we stay in the toxic relationship? But then, like, how does disconnection actually play a role in that toxic
Gotcha.
relationship? As long and as well as, like, why do we stay in
I
it? Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I understand. I understand now. Yeah, so a lot of times, again, whenever you become disconnected, and I've seen this with myself too. When I become disconnected from whatever, whether it's my physical needs, my spiritual needs, the people around me, it usually starts with I've become disconnected with myself first.
Mm-hmm.
I've not been seen to what I need to do.
Right.
And then I start using people. I start manipulating in a way.
Gotcha. I know
And
what you
it
mean.
always has the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But that's ultimately what it comes down to. Whenever you dig down to the roots of it, you're
Right.
using them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you are disconnected, it's like pulling the plug on your laptop. It doesn't have that constant power, so it kind of goes on to some automatic functions.
Yep.
And I become what I like to call a little robot person, and I start having a cycle. And I have to maintain that cycle if I'm going to survive as a disconnected human being, disconnected from my relationships, all the way around, with myself, with others, and with God. I cannot function without that connection. And the only way I can kind of work without that connection is by having my cycle, my toxic cycle.
I know what you're talking about, that Energizer Bunny mode, where you keep going and going, is what I call it.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's why a lot of people end up staying in toxic relationships. I think that's what fosters them. I think that's just, and that's what keeps it going. And it's somebody not recognizing that they have their wheel spinning, and they just keep throwing the hamsters in the wheel to keep it spinning.
Right.
But not actually taking care of the hamsters.
Exactly.
If that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Because sometimes you're the hamster. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes you put your kids in there, and then sometimes the hamsters you're putting in there are any person, place, thing, and or idea you're putting in that hamster wheel going, and that's all keeping you disconnected. Like, first of all, from God, then from ourselves, from what we're really needing, because we're abandoning ourselves in the process.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? And then lastly, you're disconnected from others. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, because in the toxic relationships, the other individual, you're trying to get from the other individual what only God can give you. And then at the same time, you see what I'm saying? So then at the same time, they are intent on not only not giving you what it is that you need and desire, but they're planning on taking you to a lower point where you're depending on them as if they are God, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? Bring it down at a lower point. They basically, their whole intention is to steal, kill, and destroy, as Jesus mentions, John 10:10. You see what I'm saying? By the time it's said and done, they want to destroy your soul and have you in a case of like thinking that you have an orphan spirit, that you're no longer having that adoption. You see what I'm saying? Through the spirit of sonship, they want to take you back to an orphan spirit through isolation and devaluation. And so, like you said, when we on that hamster wheel, we're in that disconnected mode. We're not even seeing, we're not connecting to God, and then we're not connecting to ourselves to even ask ourselves, well, what do you need right now in this minute? You know what I'm saying? Mind, soul, and spirit. What do you need? How can I help you? We're just reaching outward. And like you said, we just keep putting different things inside of different hamsters in the hamster wheel to keep it going. That's our survival while we're in it.
Yes. That's the survival pattern to keep us going and running and alive, basically.
Right, and alive, exactly. And wouldn't you also say too that when you're in that, when you're putting the hamsters, and like I said, one of the hamsters is yourself, in that hamster wheel, it gives you a false sense of safety and security at the same time.
It does. Absolutely. It does. And it feels like, whenever you get stuck in that cycle, you feel like, well, I'm doing so much for this person. They should really appreciate me. Right. And then you're also, well, why doesn't this person understand what I need? And why don't they appreciate me more? Right. And you get stuck in this cycle of, but I feel safe here. I'm comfortable. This is what I know. Right. And whatever is tangible, whatever I can control, whatever I can manipulate, and if I can just do it, and I, me. And then it really becomes an idol. For, a lot of Christians will start recognizing that. Right. And, if I can just make more money, or if I can just take care of the kids, or if I can just keep a clean house, or whatever, or if he would just understand me, or if they would just do what I told them to, or this and that and another thing. And we get so just lost in that if I. mentality.
Right. That is so true. Oh my word. Yes, 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 yes. So this is a two-part question, and that is your definition of a toxic relationship and also the red flags that you see.
Wow. Okay. So, my definition of a toxic relationship overall would probably be anything that is a threat to your health, whether
Right.
that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial. Um, and there's a lot of red flags. One of the first ones for me personally is in anything, if I start feeling resentment on something. That's a huge red flag. And usually it comes back to that I'm not setting the boundaries, the
Yep.
healthy boundaries here. And I'm either allowing myself to be a doormat, or I'm a what I like to call a recovering people pleaser. And I think I can people please people into loving me.
Gotcha.
And whenever they don't love me the way that I'm really wanting them to, then I start getting that feeling of abandonment. And and then I'll start getting really resentful toward them. And that's usually my red flag of whoa, 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 something just got toxic.
Right.
If I am not a resentful type of person at all. And I would say nobody really is. And if you're feeling resentful, you need to check where your boundary fence is at with some things.
Right.
And find out, okay, what, and be really curious about that. Why am I being resentful about this?
Exactly.
And so that is usually my first red flag with that. I mean, you can, as far as like relationships, you can Google so many things like what red flags are on that. A great book that I cannot recommend enough for people is Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud.
That's
I
so good, isn't it?
love that book.
Oh my word,
And
yes.
it is, if you can get a copy, it's an easy read. And read it, have your kids read it. It is so good about bringing up what those toxic cycles look like and the red flags to most of those.
Oh yes.
And because they all have their own different set of red flags, and there's some red flags that like I read and I'm like, oh, I that's never a problem for me. But then there's other things that I'm going, oh wow, I didn't realize that was a red flag.
Exactly.
And it
Yep.
is incredibly educational.
It is. I've got that book here too, but you're right. That is one good book because I like the way it gives you the situations, because sometimes
Yes.
when we just read something, we might not be able to see ourselves in it until we see an actual story form or slash narrative, if you know what I mean. So then when you know what I mean, you can see the dynamic.
Yes.
You're like, oh, and then you're just like, oh, this is me. Or this is
Yes.
the
Yes.
relationship I was in. This is the part they played. This is the part I played. So when it's in that narrative form, and the way they give the examples, that's so good. It's like, okay, now I see why I
Yes.
was doing this. You know what I'm saying? He had this cycle, I had that cycle, and then bringing it together, we just ended up with this like toxic dance type of thing going on. You understand what I'm saying?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's an
humans,
excellent book.
us humans learn so much better whenever things are told in a story.
Isn't that the
And
truth?
it is. And that's why God told so many stories. It's why Jesus told parables. And I love Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend because they
Yes,
do an excellent job of putting it in a storytelling style that
exactly.
really resonates with, so far, every reader that I have handed the book to.
Oh my word, yes. Like you said, that is just so, so powerful.